edge. You smile, but inside you're waiting for the collapse. Every compliment feels like a trap. Every win feels like a lie you got away with. You don't feel pride. You feel panic because deep down you think you're a mistake that hasn't been caught yet. Isn't that right? And the louder the praise gets, the more you want to disappear.
You carry yourself like someone who has it all together. You show up when you're supposed to, say the right things at the right time, and smile just enough to seem engaged, but not too much to seem fake. And from the outside, it works. People believe it. They think you're confident, capable, collected. But inside, it's a different story. Every time someone compliments you, there's a quiet voice whispering that they've made a mistake. Every time you succeed, you credit luck instead of skill. When they call you smart, or talented, or gifted, you tense up, waiting for them to see what you see. Someone who's just barely keeping it together. Someone who's performing, pretending, hoping no one looks too closely. You question every move you make, and once it's done, you replay it in your head, again and again, wondering what you should have done differently. You start to wonder if everyone else is just better at faking it, or if you really are the only fraud in the room. But you don't talk about it, because what would you even say? That you don't feel ready? That you don't feel deserving? That you're scared someone will pull back the curtain and find nothing there? So you do what you've always done. You work harder, you say less, you smile through it. You think that if you just keep performing, maybe no one will notice. Maybe they'll keep believing in the version of you that you've built, and not the one you secretly question. But the truth is, this isn't just insecurity. It isn't self-doubt, and it's definitely not humility. This feeling that you need to shrink yourself, that you're somehow fooling everyone, isn't random. It didn't start with your first failure. It started with an expectation, a quiet pressure, a belief that unless you're perfect, you're not enough. And now, it doesn't just sit in the background. It controls you. It shapes your choices. And most of all, it thrives in your silence. So the question isn't, why do I feel like this? It's, who taught you that being yourself was never going to be enough? Impostor syndrome doesn't begin with failure. It begins the moment your success feels foreign to you. When achievement doesn't feel like growth, but like a performance you're barely holding together. You weren't born second-guessing your every move. That kind of self-doubt is learned. It's taught quietly, subtly, through years of mixed signals. Praise that only comes when you follow the rules. Attention that disappears the moment you assert yourself. Environments where fitting in mattered more than being real. And over time, you absorbed the message. If you're different, you're a problem. If you stand out, you're a threat. So you adapted. You toned yourself down. You chose safety over visibility. Now, when you receive recognition, it doesn't feel earned. It feels dangerous. Compliments make you uncomfortable. You constantly wait for someone to find out you don't belong. But that fear, it doesn't come from being a fraud. It comes from never being allowed to feel real. This is how imposter syndrome survives, by convincing you that self-doubt is humility, that shrinking yourself is a form of virtue. But it's not. It's a cage built from years of quiet conditioning. The fraud isn't you. The fraud is the version of you that had to play it small just to feel accepted. And the more you succeed, the louder that false self begins to crack. You tell yourself you got lucky, that people overestimate you, that if they really knew how uncertain you feel inside, they'd never respect you again. But here's the irony. The very traits that make you question yourself, your ability to self-reflect, to hold high standards, to notice what others miss, are also the reason you're so competent. You feel like a fraud, not because you're lacking, but because you're hyper-aware. You see all the cracks others gloss over. And in that clarity, you forget that everyone else has them too. Imposter syndrome doesn't mean you're unworthy. It means your mind has turned vigilance into self-sabotage. Every compliment feels like a setup. Every success like borrowed time. You don't let yourself feel accomplished, because accomplishment would force you to face something terrifying. The idea that you might actually be capable, that maybe the person they see in you isn't a mistake, but that possibility feels too big, too fragile. So instead, you stay skeptical of yourself. You rehearse failure. You downplay wins. You build a fortress of modesty so no one ever sees how scared you are of being seen. And yet, the more you hide, the more the fraud feeling grows. Not because you are one, but because you keep silencing the part of you that's trying to become real. There's a voice in your head, quiet, but constant. It doesn't scream. You've tuned it out too well for that. But it whispers every time something good happens, every time you're seen, every time you step forward. It says, you don't belong here, not with them, not at that level, not with that title, that recognition, that attention. And because that voice sounds familiar, because it sounds like you believe it. But the truth is, it was never yours to begin with. That doubt, it was planted by a parent who only praised perfection, by a teacher who made failure feel final, by a system that taught you to measure worth in trophies, test scores, applause. So you learned to perform, to meet expectations before they were spoken, to anticipate rejection by rejecting yourself first. You became good, exceptionally good, at appearing confident. But inside, you never stopped scanning for the moment it all unravels. And every time someone compliments you, it doesn't feel good. It feels dangerous. Like a test you didn't study for. Like a spotlight you didn't ask for. So you shrink. You deflect. You crack a joke. You work twice as hard to prove something they already believe. You think humility protects you, but it's become a disguise. And the longer you wear it, the harder it becomes to remember who you are beneath it. Here's the truth you've avoided. Imposter syndrome doesn't mean you're a fraud. It means you've outgrown the version of yourself you still believe in. You've become more than you admit, but your mind is still catching up. The fear you feel, it's not proof you don't belong. It's a sign that you've entered territory your self-image never prepared for. And instead of updating that image, you cling to doubt, because doubt feels familiar. It feels safer than arrogance, cleaner than pride. But safe doesn't get you anywhere. You've mistaken discomfort for danger. You think that because your confidence hasn't arrived, your competence must not exist. But confidence is the last thing to show up. It follows after action, after evidence, after repetition. And here's what no one tells you. Feeling like an impostor doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're growing. You're stepping into a space that demands more of you. More clarity, more presence, more ownership. And that's uncomfortable because it's real. This isn't about faking it till you make it. It's about becoming so familiar with discomfort that it no longer scares you. Because the goal was never to stop feeling like a fraud. The goal is to stop letting that feeling decide who you become. So the next time the voice says, "You don't belong here," you say, "Maybe not yet, but I'm staying anyway." You assume this is just self-doubt, something a bit of confidence, a few more accomplishments, or the right recognition will fix. But this isn't a surface-level insecurity. It runs deeper, not because you lack ability, but because somewhere along the line, you were taught to distrust yourself. You were conditioned to believe that worth is measured by performance and identity by validation. That to be accepted, you had to shapeshift, suppress your doubts, mask your struggles, and overcompensate for every perceived shortcoming. You didn't just learn to succeed. You learned to perform success. So when you win, it feels like luck. When you're praised, it feels like a mistake. When you're seen, you flinch, afraid they'll look too closely and realize you don't belong here. Not because you haven't earned it, but because you've been taught that earning it isn't enough. That real belonging comes only when the performance is perfect, and that even then, it might still be temporary. What you're battling isn't just imposter syndrome. It's the result of being raised in a system that rewards masks more than honesty. A system where perfection is expected, vulnerability is punished, and self-worth is always conditional. And until you confront that root, no amount of praise will ever feel real. Because deep down, you were never taught to believe in who you are, only in how well you can appear to be something else. The danger of this mindset isn't just that it makes you doubt yourself. It's that it keeps you dependent. Dependent on praise to feel secure. Dependent on achievement to feel worthy. Dependent on doing more, proving more, saying yes to everything. Because the moment you stop, the fear creeps back in. What if they see through me? This fear becomes a quiet dictator. It shapes your choices. You take on more than you should. You avoid risks that might expose you. You downplay your own ideas, letting others speak louder, even when they know less. You build your identity around being competent, composed, capable, never showing cracks, never showing need. And the more you play the role, the the more you lose sight of who you actually are. Because here's the truth that no one wants to say out loud. Imposter syndrome doesn't mean you're broken. It means you've been forced into roles that never gave you the space to be whole. You were praised for how well you fit in, not for how well you understood yourself. And the voice that whispers, "You're not enough," it was never yours. It was built from every standard you didn't choose, every expectation you were pressured to meet, every version of success that didn't belong to you. The lie isn't that you feel like a fraud. The lie is that you ever needed to prove yourself in the first place. You've spent so long trying to maintain an image, carefully managing impressions, meeting expectations, avoiding missteps, that you've started to forget what it feels like to simply be. Somewhere along the line, your identity became entangled with performance. The more praise you received, the more pressure you felt. The more you achieved, the more hollow it became. You were never praised for being real. You were praised for being exceptional, agreeable, impressive. And so you learned, slowly and subtly, that your value depended on how well you could keep up the act. That if you let people too close, if they saw the cracks in your confidence, the uncertainty beneath the surface, they'd realize you don't belong. But here's the paradox. You feel like an imposter, not because you're unworthy, but because you've been operating in a world that rewards masks. You've been told to be authentic, yet penalized the moment your authenticity made others uncomfortable. You've been taught to be confident, but only within limits that don't threaten the ego of those around you. So you stay quiet, stay small, stay polished. The lie isn't that you're a fraud. The lie is that you have to prove yourself to people who never understood your complexity to begin with. Imposter syndrome thrives in systems where perfection is demanded but never defined, where excellence is expected but rarely supported, where identity is fragmented into roles and labels, each one more disconnected than the last. You begin to doubt yourself, not because you're incapable, but because you've had to navigate spaces that never truly saw you. The solution isn't to overcompensate with louder confidence, or to chase endless validation in the hope that it will finally silence the voice in your head. The solution is to reclaim what that voice was built to bury, your right to exist without justification. You don't have to explain away your doubts to be credible. You don't need to hide your fear to be respected. You don't have to silence your vulnerability to be strong. What you need is to stop measuring yourself against a version of success that was never built with you in mind. Imposter syndrome doesn't vanish the moment you succeed. It fades when you stop internalizing the idea that success requires you to be someone else. You're not faking it. You're surviving a system that made you think honesty was dangerous. Now, it's time to dismantle that idea, quietly, steadily, completely. You've spent so long pretending not to feel it, dismissing the doubt, laughing it off, nodding along when they called you confident, while quietly bracing for the moment everything would collapse. But this feeling, this sense that you don't belong, isn't a personal defect. It's the result of years spent adapting to systems that reward image over authenticity. You were taught to perform, not to be seen. You were taught to prove yourself, not trust yourself. And so you internalized a truth that was never yours, that being yourself would never be enough. But here's what changes everything. The moment you stop asking for permission, the moment you stop playing a role to earn approval that was always conditional, the moment you stop calling it humility when it's really fear. Impostor syndrome doesn't disappear when you succeed. It fades when you stop pretending. When you decide you don't owe the world a perfect version of you, just a real one. And maybe that's exactly where your power begins.